Hi guys, it's Heather with Running with Scissors, and today we are going to do the tutorial on your November sub box. And you saw in the opening what you guys are making this month. And I know the camera's at a funky angle once again. I'm never going to be a video master, that's for sure. But I really want you guys to be able to see my workspace. So that's what we're going to focus on. So you saw, again, the opening picture is we are making 7 different ornaments. And so let's see what's inside your kit. There's a lot in this kit this month because even though ornaments are little, they take all kinds of stuff. So, and in no particular order here, I'm just going to tell you everything that is here. There is a baby wipe because you are going to use the baby wipe stain method. You have a bag of ribbons and jingle bells. There's some wedges in here, a super glue, a little tiny piece of hot glue stick, and a wood bead. You have a half circle pattern. You have a set of paint pods. You have a piece of felt. Now your felt may vary in color. You could have red or you could have green. You have a bundle of yarn, and once again, this could vary in color also. You could have like an off-white or what we would call sweater weather. You could have this color gray, or you could have a lighter color gray. You have 2 brushes. You have a flat brush and a round brush. And then you have a pile of wood. So here is one of the ornaments is the Grinch hand and ice skates. You have a little Santa gnome. It's hard for me to hold this stuff up to the camera. You have a little Rudolph, or I suppose he doesn't have to be Rudolph if you don't want him to be. But for us, he was Rudolph. You have a snowman with your initial in it, and we used the initial of the person who is on the delivery end of this sub box. So if you ordered for somebody, it's whoever the delivery went to. And then we have this little faux palette. It's hard to keep all together, but it's a little faux palette and it says Jingle Bells. Okay, so that is all of the stuff in your box. Now what you might want to have handy, my camera keeps falling. What you might want to have handy is your hot glue gun. You'll want fabric scissors and paper scissors. Always have baby wipes. Baby wipes are so handy. You get paint on something you didn't want paint on, you can wipe it off with a baby wipe, and of course it's great for cleaning up your hands. A cup of water, because you're going to have to rinse these paintbrushes out and reuse them. And you might want to have some paper towels handy to dry these paintbrushes. And you can use your pizza box to mix paint on, or a paper plate, whichever you guys prefer. Okay, so let's get started. Plug those hot glue guns in and get them heated up. And I'm going to see if I can't wedge something underneath this camera here because it clearly does not want to stay in place. Okay, I think that might do it. All right, first, let's do the gnome first because he's the only thing that doesn't require paint. He is going to use the little round ball, the little wood bead, the bundle of yarn, the half sheet of felt, the pattern, and your hot glue gun. And so then your little mini glue stick. Okay, so you'll need your scissors as well. And I would love you to use fabric scissors for this, but of course you guys, whatever floats your boat. Now, if you want to, you can trace around this pattern, But for me, I'm just gonna hold it in my hand and I'm just going to cut it. This is your gnome hat. I'm just placing the straight edge of the pattern up against the straight edge of the felt. And I'm going to take my fabric scissor and I'm just going to cut around the felt or around the pattern. It doesn't have to be perfect. Of course, you don't want jagged scissor marks, but if it's a little oversized, that's fine. Okay, so there is my gnome hat. And I'm just gonna set that stuff aside because we don't need it. And now I am going to take my bundle of yarn and I'm going to unravel it. And I'm going to make the gnome beard. So now I'm just gonna take my hand and I'm going to wrap my yarn around my fingers, but I want my fingers kind of spread out, and I'm gonna try to wrap my yarn as far out as I can and hold it. Now don't worry about starting it right here and you got some of these pieces that are gonna be shorter because gnome beards aren't all the same length. And I'm just gonna keep wrapping my yarn around my fingers until I have about, well, honestly, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use the whole entire bundle with the exception of about 18 inches. So I'll show you that in just a second because that 18-inch leftover is what we're going to tie it into a knot with and use as our hanger. So I'm just going to keep wrapping until I don't have too much yarn left. And I'm just loosely wrapping because I want this to be kind of long. Now, if you don't want to use your hand for this, you could cut a piece of your pizza box off and you would just make like a 5-inch square and wrap the yarn around it, much like we did when we did a tassel. So I have about this much yarn left over. I'm going to undo one wrap. So I have a good 18-inch length. And then I'm just going to cut that. All right, so here we go. So then I'm going to just slide it off and keep my hand or my thumb, my fingers, through the top loop there. And I'm going to take this little piece that I cut off and I'm going to slide it through that whole entire bunch. And I'm going to bring the ends up to distribute it evenly. Okay, so see what I'm doing? I'm bringing the ends together and then distributing it evenly. And I'm going to tie this in a knot, and it's kind of awkward here because this is so long, but first you just got to get that first little bunch tied. And I'm going to tie it one more time. So now I've got a double knot in it. All right, now I'm going to take the other end and I'm just going to cut so these are not loops anymore. All right, there we go. So you can see that it's not all the same size, not all the same length. And that's okay because it's a gnome and his beard is not supposed to be the same length. It's all over the place. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to lay this on our felt. We want this down towards the end. I want to make sure you can see everything okay. We want this towards the edge of the circle. We don't want it way up here. We want it down here. And we're going to, this might take a couple of tries, guys. You might have to move it over closer to one side because you want to roll this felt into a hat, but you want it to look decent. You don't want it too big up here. So you might have to roll it up. It took me like, I made 2 of these. It took me probably 3 or 4 tries just to get it the way I wanted it, but I was pretty particular about it. I knew how I wanted it to look. Okay, so I'm happy with that. And I want to end it with this felt right in the front here because I want this to be I kind of want it to be a statement. I don't want it to look like this. But if you prefer where you don't see the seam or the ending, then you can do that as well. But for me, this is how I want it. I want this flap in front. So now that I know how I want it, I'm going to take and I'll put just a little dab of hot glue underneath where that flap closes. I don't want a ton of hot glue because I don't want it coming out of the felt. Because once it's on the felt, then you have to cut it out and it just doesn't look good. All right. And then I'm gonna lift up the edge in the back and I'll put some hot glue in there to glue my yarn in. And I'm gonna do the same thing in the front. But you gotta be sparingly with the hot glue because you don't want it squishing out onto your beard. Okay. So that's what we have. You see how these stick out from the top of the hat because that's gonna be our hanger. Now you could have glued the beard down to the felt before you rolled the hat, but when I did it like that the first time, I kept having to re-roll the hat to get it the way that I wanted it, so I didn't like that method. This is the one that I ended up preferring. Remember, I said I made a couple of these. All right, and then you're gonna take your bead, and it is a bead, so it has holes in it, but take and put the holes to the side, not like this. Not so this is, you don't want that to be the nose. You don't want the hole. So just turn it to the side. And then you're gonna glue that in the center, just at the felt hat. So like right there. Remember, use just a little bit of hot glue on the back of that ball, on the back of that bead. You don't need a lot of hot glue. And remember, hot glue's hot, it will burn. And those burns hurt for 24 hours. It's almost like clockwork. Okay, now we're gonna take, there's my nose glued on. Now we're gonna take this end and you're gonna decide how long you want that hanger to be. And then you're just gonna tie an overhand knot. And then just trim those ends. And then here you have your little gnome ornament. All right. And you can trim his beard. I see that there are a couple that I wouldn't mind trimming, so I'm just gonna go ahead and trim those. All right, there we go. There's your first ornament. Okay, so let's set him aside, and now we're gonna move on to the painting portion. So let's first let me first say that, okay, so we had to decide what colors to give you, and it's always really tough because we would love to give you even more colors, but you use so very little of them, and these little paint pods, while they're convenient, they're kind of pricey. So is our paint, frankly. But what we decided is that for the colors that we wanted to use, you could use white to change the colors of, any of this here. So we gave you this green because we thought this was the most appropriate color for a Grinch. Of course, you needed an orange for a snowman nose. You'll never use all that orange. It's you just need a tiny, tiny bit. But these paint pods are nice because this paint will stay for a really long time. So you could use this for other projects down the road. Maybe you save it for future sub boxes. Maybe you use it to paint rocks like one of our sub boxers does with her grandchildren. So these paint pods are nice and probably worth the money in the end. We gave you red because, of course, so much red in Christmas. Brown because of the reindeer, and we figured we could add some white to this and get a lighter color for the reindeer as well. And of course some black and white. Okay, so let's get to painting. Now if you have other colors, you can absolutely use that. If you have like maybe those little apple barrel bottles of paint, the acrylic paint, you could use those too. All of that is totally an option. there is no stencil involved here, so it's not imperative that you use the paint that we give you. Okay, let's get going. Now, you do have some paint wedges, so if you want to use those for anything, you can. Let me just fish them out of my bag here. I might end up using the brush for a lot of things. So I'm going to start with a snowman, and I'm just going to open my paint up. I know I'm probably going to use a majority of, well, I'm probably going to use all of the colors. So I'm just going to get them opened up. It's cold in the studio. Not sure when you're watching this, probably the minute I post it, but today is Saturday. It's October, I think it's the 23rd. And it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's freezing. And last night we had, we volunteered at the haunted house across the street at Looking Glass Studio. You may have seen we advertised that quite a bit. And we are volunteering again tonight, but it's chilly and it's rainy. Okay, so I'm just going to take my carrot nose for my snowman, and I'm going to paint him with the paintbrush. Of course, you can use your wedges. If you're going to use the wedges, though, I would plan out my colors for everything. So while you got your wedge in orange, you're painting everything that you wanted orange. That way, you don't have to worry about not having enough wedges. And also, Melissa and I, we do this a lot in the studio. If you paint something with this and you don't get the whole wedge soaked, we'll cut the end off and keep using the wedge until we run out of it. So I just cleaned my brush and wiped it down, and now I'm gonna use the black to paint my hat. Now my orange does need multiple coats because you know that's how orange rolls. You could always paint anything orange white first, because the white helps make that orange a little more vibrant. But everything else that you paint should only require one coat, especially if you're painting with a paintbrush. If you're painting with a wedge, you might have to do two. Okay, so there's my snowman hat, and then this is the brim to his hat. Now I'm probably gonna stop talking so much and just talk you through what you need to be talked through, because I'll end up speeding this video up for you guys so you don't have to watch so much, because I imagine it's gonna take probably well over an hour from start to finish. Okay, I'm just gonna keep going here again. I'm gonna stop talking. You'll see what I'm doing on the video. If I have to instruct you what to do, I'll slow it back down and I'll talk you through it. So just going to paint this white. Now, if you have a paint marker and you want to paint your letter a different color, you can use a paint marker to do that. It will be easy. Otherwise, it might just be easier to paint the whole entire thing one color. Okay, you could see that I showed you in the video that I was picking up a wedge, and I had just decided that because of the letter and stuff, this one was a little bit easier to paint with a wedge. I am going to set this guy aside to let him dry for a second, and while I've got the white out, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab my ice skate, and I am going to grab this guy, which is the piece off of the Grinch cuff, and the eyes to the reindeer. And I'm going to grab this, which is the piece off of the gnome hat. This piece off of the gnome hat. And the gnome itself, because I want to paint his beard white. So while I have the white on my wedge, I'm just going to do all of that. And you can see I'm dipping, which you've not seen, I'm dipping into the paint pod. Let me see if I turn it around, Heather. I'm dipping into the paint pod, and then I'm scraping it back onto the edge of the paint pod so the excess paint goes back into the paint pod. And then I'm just gonna pounce my paint on my gnome beard and all of my other pieces that I set aside here. Now for this gnome beard, you can go ahead and go up to the paint line or the line of the hat because it has a separate brim piece that covers it. And you can go all the way down to the shoes because the shoes have a cover as well, separate pieces. Okay, just like that. I'm gonna do my ice skates white. But while it's still wet, I'm gonna grab just the tiniest little bit of black. And I'm gonna get that in here and I'm gonna just start smoothing this around. I'm just pushing down on my wedge and blending that black in with that white because I want my Santa beard, my gnome beard, to be gray. I don't want it to be black. Or I'm sorry, I don't want it to be white. And the reason I don't want it to be white is because the brim of the hat is white and I just want it to have some color. So that's what I did with that. And you see that took me like 5 seconds. All I did was put a little bit of black in there and just start pushing down and smoothing that around. And that's how I did that beard. Super simple, guys. All right. I'm gonna clean my hands just a little bit. I'm gonna pick up my little Nomi mustache and I'm going to use that same wedge that I just finished up with. And I'm just gonna go ahead and get some paint on this little gnome mustache. And it's just that mixed in gray. I'm not gonna change color. I'm not gonna do anything else. I'm just going to paint it with whatever's left over in my wedge. And there we go. I'm gonna set that aside. Okay, how about we move on to red? Let's move on to red. So what in our little arsenal needs to be red? Well, our gnome hat, I'm gonna paint my gnome hat red. You can paint it any color you want. The Rudolph nose. The sleeve on the Grinchy guy. And, I don't know. For right now, I think that's going to be it. So let's do that. Now you can use the wedge if you want to. I'm going to start with the brush and see how I do. I'm just going to paint my Rudolph nose red. And now I'm going to paint the cuff red as well. And I'm going to paint the bulb red. Okay, and now I'm going to paint the gnome hat red. Now I know on this gnome hat, all I have to do is come down to these little round ridges here. These little round ridges right here and on this side. because that's where this guy sits. So I know that he will cover where the beard meets the hat. So I'm just gonna do that. And again, you can use your wedge or you can use your brush. Now, as far as painting how high, again, the hat does have that little cotton fluff at the top. So you only have to go up to that little fluff ball. Right there. Okay, I'm going to go back and start over and give him a little second coat of paint here. Guys, I think I might have to turn the heat on. It's freezing in here. Okay. Okay, I think that's it for red. So now I'm gonna just leave my brush and I'm gonna take and I'm going to paint the gnome nose red. And I'm gonna have a little bit of excess paint on it. Can you see how I have that excess paint? Because I'm gonna clean my brush real quick and I'm gonna dip it in the white paint, just a tiny little bit of white paint, and I'm going to brush that on with the wet red and turn this nose pink. Now you might have to keep brushing for a minute. To blend that in. There we go. It's a little pinker than I would like it. So I'm gonna rinse my brush again. And I'm just gonna grab just a little more white and I'm gonna paint it in again. And I'm just gonna keep painting until I blend it all into the same color. Oh yeah, that's good. There we go. Now we got a little pink gnome nose. And we're gonna let that guy dry. All right. Now let's see. Let's paint our Rudolph. And we're gonna paint this guy, our little reindeer. I'm gonna paint the whole entire thing with the dark brown. And instead of using my paintbrush, I'm going to go ahead and use one of my half wedges right in front of me here. And I'm just gonna pounce that paint on. I want to keep this kind of light. I don't want a ton of paint on him. I don't feel like he needs to have a ton of paint. So as I'm pouncing, I'm also like dragging my wedge. Can you see my drag there? Because I don't want a ton of paint on him. And so when I drag it, I'm smoothing or distributing that paint a little more. Not concentrating it to one area. All right, perfect. You don't have to do the antlers here because you're gonna glue on. You can see how I just drag that paint so it's not super solid. And I like it just like that. That's how I'm gonna leave it. But I've got my little antlers here And to make them stand out, I'm going to do them a lighter shade of brown. So now I'm just going to take that same wedge. I got to add some white paint to it. So I'm going to get it clean, my brush clean, and I'm going to grab a little bit of white paint, and I'm just going to brush it on the end of my wedge. That way I wasn't dipping my brown wedge into my white paint and muddying up my white paint because I still need it. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and it's not pretty right now, but it'll turn out, I promise. So now I'm just going to come in and I'm going to dab these antlers and work the paint in until I get a nice solid color. Kind of like that. There we go. I'm gonna do the same thing with the other one. There you go. That's what that'll look like. Oh, I think that's perfect. I'm not gonna mess with it anymore. I like it. Okay, so now for this guy, you see he has little drawn in eyebrows above his eyes. You can take your super fine round brush and you can dip it in just a little tiny bit of black, and you can paint those in. Just stay inside the lines. It's just like coloring. You can see that, just like that. And then he's got little marks on his ears, you know, to show the inside of his ear. I'm just gonna take my black paint in that little fine brush, and I'm just gonna trace along those lines, just like that. Now, if you have a paint marker, again, you could use a paint marker to do that. Or you don't have to do it at all. All right, that's all I did there. Oh, he's got a mouth down there too. We could take and do the mouth real quick. I made my mouth a little wider. All right, wipe that paintbrush off. Okay, let's see. Maybe we should start putting some stuff together, huh? Or how about we move on to black again? Because I decided, okay, here's what we're gonna do. I wanna paint the edge of this black, but the background, I want to do like a brown stain. So I'm gonna take my baby wipe. And I'm not 100% sure yet what I'm gonna do with the sled. So I'm gonna cut my baby wipe in half. If you guys have more baby wipes, you don't have to cut this in half, but if you don't, cut it in half just in case you change your mind and wanna do what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take the other half and I'm gonna put it back in the bag so it stays wet for a minute, because I have an idea for the little palette jingle bells. So, all right, so I'm gonna take this baby wipe and I'm gonna just dip it in the brown. I don't need a ton of it. And I'm gonna rub it onto this ornament because I want this to have a little stain feel to it. Okay, right there. There you go. That's all I did. Now that baby wipe, I'm just gonna throw it to the side because I don't need it anymore. And I'm gonna take this guy and I'm gonna paint the edges of it black. And I have one wedge left here, so I think I'm gonna go ahead and do that with the wedge. And I'm also gonna paint the little gnome feet black. So let's do that. So scrape off so you don't have a ton of paint on that. And I'm going to just dab my gnome feet. There we go. And then I'm going to dab the outside of this ornament black. Now is a good time while the black paint is out to double check your snowman hat and make sure that you don't need any more black paint on that. Kind of shifted gears from when we started the video, but it seemed, I guess I'm more practical to do it this way, which I should have known. But sometimes you just gotta roll with the punches. So I'm gonna get another coat of black on this ornament frame here real quick. And then I think that's it for the black right now. So we're just gonna set that aside. Okay, now we've got our little Grinch hand and this little topper to the little ornament bulb. I'm gonna pick up my gray wedge again, and I'm just gonna go ahead and paint that gray. That's it, just that. It's pretty small. You don't even have to use that if you don't want to, that extra piece. You could just paint it right on here, but all right, now let's do our little Grinch. Little Grinch hand. I'm gonna use that green that we put in the paint pots for you. And I am using a brush, but again, if you want to cut off a piece of your wedge, you can do that. And there's our little Grinch hand. We'll have to let him dry and put another coat on him in just a second. And let's see what else. Now we're on to our last ornament, which is this little faux palette, if you will. And the way it looks is you've got these two, you've got 3 long pieces. And then you've got 2 short pieces, and you're just going to want to match the holes up so it ends up looking like that. And then this guy sits on there like that. Okay. So I am going to paint this red, but I'm going to use the other half of my baby wipe because I kind of want it to look like a little, I don't know, like it's like stained red. So I'm just going to do one piece at a time, dipping my baby wipe into my red paint and coming over here and doing that. And each one is only going to require this one coat here. So okay, so that's those pieces, or there are those pieces. I'm going to come and I'm going to give my Grinch hand another coat because he's dry now. All right, that should be good for him. I'm gonna clean my brush. And I'm gonna give my carrot nose one last coat because he looks like he could still use another coat of paint. So that orange is finicky. You could always paint a white coat first before you paint your orange coat. Okay, now I have the skis to my skates left, and I have the little jingle bell. I think in my head all along I was gonna do the Jingle Bells gray, so I think right now that's what I'm gonna do. And here would be a good time to go ahead and use your paper plate or your pizza box. And I'm just gonna use my table cover, but I'm gonna pull out a scoop of my white paint out of my container and put it on my table. I'm just pulling out a scoop with the paintbrush because I don't need that much paint. As you can see, most of your paint pods, with the exception of your white probably, are still nearly full. I'm cleaning my white paintbrush, the paintbrush that I used to scoop the white out, and I'm gonna grab just a tiny dab of black on the brush, just a tiny little dab. And I'm gonna mix that in with the paint I put on my surface here on my table cover. And that gives me my gray. And now I'm going to paint, I'm gonna paint my jingle bells. You can use a wedge if you want to, just if you don't have one left, like I said, cut the end off of it and you can use that. Paint the jingle bells. And then I'm going to paint the bottom of my ice skates, the blade part. I take my round brush and I'm going to, the round brush is a lot finer. So I'm going to use that to get up in here, into here, where the blade is showing through the other skate. I'm just coloring like I would on if I were coloring in a coloring book. Using my paintbrush like a coloring crayon. Now, if you have a paint marker, a silver paint marker, you could do the same thing with your silver paint marker. But I didn't want to cheat and use a paint marker because you guys might not have them. But if you do a lot of painting with us, paint markers might come in handy to buy yourself a set. You can buy yourself a nice set on Amazon of all different colors for around $15. But mostly you would use silver, black, and white. So if you just got yourself a silver, black, and white paint marker, you'd be good to go. Okay, there's our ice skates. All right. I think we might be done painting. So let's close our paints up. Let's start putting stuff together. And if we need to touch some paint up somewhere, well, we'll come back to it. But right now, we're going to just set all of our painting supplies to the side. And we're going to start gluing stuff together. So let's start with our little gnome here. A little Santa gnome. And let me see if I can tip this just a little bit. There you go. All right, let's get our glue. All right. We're gonna take this little brim. We're gonna put a little spot of glue on the back of it. Remember, try to keep it to the center and try to keep it thin. If you get too much, dab it off on your pizza box, okay? Don't want tons of it. glue that down. Then we're gonna take and we're gonna glue the little hat down. We gotta line up the hat so it's at the right circle. So get the circles matched up. Match the hat up with the backer hat, the backer bulb. Let's see if you know what I mean. So you gotta line up the edges so that you might have to twist this in a circle till you match the ridges. Okay. All right, I want you to see this. See, I have a little red paint showing right there. I'm just gonna come back in with my little fine round brush, and I'm gonna pick up some of that paint that I had still on my table, and I'm just gonna come up to the edge here underneath, and I'm gonna paint it in. I don't think you'll ever be able to tell. And now I am going to glue this little Nomi's shoes on. So let's glue his shoes. Okay, and then we've got his nose. Let's glue his nose on. And there's our little gnome Santa. All right, let's do our Grinch bulb next. We're gonna just run a line of glue around the ring of the bulb and line up the top and the edges. Pressure activates that super glue, so press that down. All right, now let's dry fit this guy in here. Now we want it lined up so the hanger at the top and his hand is straight. So like you don't want to do this, right? Because then it would be upside down. So you want the hanger at the top and the hand coming off the side. So I'm gonna go ahead and put some glue on the back of this guy. And glue him in. Take his cuff, the little cuff. And again, this is one of those pieces you got to line up. So make sure you got it going the right direction. Give it some glue and glue it on. Perfect. You'll want to take your little top of your ornament if you used it. If you don't want to use it, that's okay. You don't have to. Give it a little bit of glue and glue it into place. It's pretty small. Pretty small. But that's what that looks like. I think it almost looks better. I don't know. It might be too much of a layer. You decide if you want to use it or not. You might not like that. Okay, so there's your Grinch ornament. There's nothing to glue on the ice skates, so we're just going to set them to the side. Let's do our snowman next. Now our snowman gets a brim. This is your hat brim. And you're just going to come over and place that on where you want it. I'm going to put mine on just a little tiny bit of an angle. Just a little bit of an angle. See that? And then I'm going to glue his nose on. Now, I think I'm going to bust open the black paint again for a second. And I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to take my flat brush. because the end of my flat brush is narrower than the end of my round brush. And I'm just going to use the end, okay? I'm going to dip it in my black paint. So I just have a little bit, oh my gosh, a little bit of black paint on the end of it. And I'm going to give my snowman some eyes just by dotting them with the end of my paintbrush. Like that. And I'm even going to do a mouth. Like that. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. Okay, now let's do our reindeer. So we're going to glue our antlers on first. Now, if you're Maggie and you're feeling real extra, maybe you glitter your reindeer nose. If you're Maggie, you probably are going to glitter all of this. But I think the reindeer nose would look cute glittered. Glue our antlers. And then let's glue our eyeballs on. And then our nose. We've scored those areas to help you with the eyeballs and the nose, so hopefully that helps you with placement. So that's what your deer looks like. And then last, oh, you know what? I forgot my snowman nose. Did you guys notice that? Did you realize that? Here's my snowman gnome nose. He just fits underneath the nose. Whoops. Okay, now let's move on to our last one. Okay, so remember for this one, the long piece with no hole gets put in the middle, and the holes for the two long pieces get put at the top. And just make sure that they're on the outside edges. And then this piece lines up over top, and this piece lines up at the bottom. So the easiest way to do this is to do the bottom piece first. Make sure all of those pieces are flush to the bottom edge, and then put this top bar across, flush left, right, flush bottom, and press down. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing with the top piece. And at this point, if you got everything straight, then your holes will line up perfectly. Flush top, flush left, right. And you should have perfectly aligned holes like that. This is what it looks like. It's like a little mini palette. And then we're going to take this jingle bell and we're going to put some glue on the back of it. Now this one's it's pretty thin. So if you get too much glue, just remember, dab it off on your table cover or on your pizza box so it doesn't squish out all over the place, okay? We want it to be neat. And I'm going to just put it right in the middle and press down. And then there's that. All right, so now let's put our glue away. A little bit left in our glue tube. And let's bust out all of our hanger pieces and our little bells. Now we gave you a bunch of stuff to choose from. So choose whatever you want to hang your pieces from. I'm gonna dry up my little paint here. Okay. It's up to you. Doesn't matter what you use. I'm going to use, I'm going to use the rat tail. That's the silky round cord that's black. I'm going to use the rat tail for this Jingle Bells, I think. And there's plenty of it. So I am just going to cut off, it's probably about a foot of rat tail. And I just threaded it through the holes in the front, and I'm just going to tie a square knot to the ends. And I'm going to just pull that through like that, so the hanger's all in the front. And then I'm going to take, I want a little bit of green in this guy here. So I'm going to take some of my green ribbon, and I'm going to thread it through the top of my Jingle Bell. And I'm going to come up, and I'm going to tie it off right around that, just around that little top of the Jingle Bell. Just like that. Just tie a double knot. So you have that. And I'm going to do that with the other one as well, on the other end of the green. And then, let's see, I want them just to hang, one just a little higher than the other. I'm going to trim these little ends here. You don't need that hanging out like that. So I'm just going to arrange them where one bell hangs a little higher than the other. I'm going to bring the ends of my ribbon together and tie an overhand knot. And it's about 3 inches. I just measured against my little ornament to see how high I wanted it. And then I'm just going to cut off. So I tied a knot there. I'm just cutting off a couple inches higher because I want to be able to tie this around the rat tail. All right, so here's my little Jingle Bells. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to tie this around the rat tail. And I'm just going to use a double knot. You could tie a ribbon if you wanted to. Like you could tie it into a bow if you wanted to. I'm just going to do that. And I'm just going to trim the ends off. There you go. So there's one finished. And now we have our little Rudolph. Well, let's see. Let's use some red. I'm going to use red on the Rudolph. You could use brown, I guess, if you wanted to. You have a little bit of everything here, so, you know, whatever you want to do. I'm just going to string it through and bring it up to how high I want it to hang, which I don't want it to hang very high or very low. So I'm going to say it's probably only about a foot of ribbon, really. So looks like that. And then I'm going to take these two ends and I'm just going to tie them in an overhand knot and put the knot end as close to the ends as possible. Okay. So then there's that hanger. And the ice skates, I'm going to take, I'm going to take the black flat ribbon, not the rat tail, the black flat, and I'm going to wrap that through all of these to make laces. So I think what I'm going to do to start is feed it through from the front to the back. And then I'm going to put just a little dab of hot glue there to hold that ribbon down. See how I did that? Just a tiny little bit of hot glue. And then I'm going to just wrap this ribbon around and around. Through these little holes. Now, again, if you have a paint marker, you could just paint mark the ribbon look, so it kind of look like laces. Or you can use your really fine brush and your black paint, and you could do the same thing, but I kind of want the realistic look. So I'm going to take the time to do this, and I'll quit talking so I can fast forward, so you guys don't have to sit through it. Around the back again and just put a little dab of hot glue, just a tiny little bit. Press that ribbon into it and trim it off. There's that. And now I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Okay, there's our ice skates, and I'm going to use my silver ribbon, and again, kind of the same way we just did the other one. I'm going to feed it through, decide the length I want it, cut it off. It's only about 1 foot, and then tie an overhand knot. And with the knot is close to the end. And there's our ice skates. Well, I've got my snowman in front of me, so I may as well do him. I think I'm going to use the rat tail on him. I'll put the rat tail in. It all works the same way, guys. Just thread it up. Tie an overhand knot very close to the ends. There's our snowman. The Grinch. I'm going to use red on the Grinch. There's the Grinch. And then we've got our Santa left, and I'm going to use the last of my rat tail on my Santa gnome. Bring my ends up. And then there's our Santa, our little Santa gnome. All right, you guys, I hope that you guys love this. Melissa and I knew we wanted to bring you ornaments for your December or your November box. I guess it would be your November box here. Just in time for December, for Christmas. So we hope you love all these, guys. We hope you had fun making them. This one was a little bit more tedious than the last couple projects, but certainly fun, right? All right, guys, let us know in comments with your pictures on how you did and if you have any questions. But otherwise, thanks so much, and we will see you guys soon.